would like to thank the member of the opposition. Now open the floor for 3 minutes of process.
All right, so you talked a lot about how advocacy has to come from the students, and that if it doesn't, it's robbing students of their voice. And I'm just kind of wondering what your opinion is on, in the 1960s, when they imposed integration of the school system, because the majority of students were against that at that point. And was that robbing the students of their voice, or was that just a top-down good idea?
What we think is that comparing segregation of students based on race to whether or not students get cigarette is a grossly distorted practice, which obviously you intended to do. I think that's something that we need to look at here, is the fact that students on this campus can actively fight against this ban if it's enforced top-down by simply eluding it in the number of practices that we've talked about. So it's not even like you can enforce this ban and it will actually work and students will get used to it and come to know that it is good, which is what happened with segregation. What will happen is that you will enforce a ban, it will go into the books, and people will continue to elude it for time immemorial. So I think the problem that we're seeing here is that there's a basic lack of efficacy in your model that I don't think supports in any way the moral thrust of your argument. If students don't actually stop smoking, then you don't have a moral argument, because we're still spending money for tobacco companies, we're still supporting the practices you talked about, we're still damaging our bodies in the way that you talked about. You haven't presented an actual alternative to student smoking, and by refusing to acknowledge the realities of this complex problem, which requires compromise, you have failed to put in force a model with any kind of moral or pragmatic thrust to it, which I think makes it very different from any kind of segregation model.
Thank you for your speech. And do you think that people simply not following the law is generally a good enough reason to not enact that law in the first place?
We think in this case, especially since this is a law that doesn't exist outside of Bard's campus, but that will exist arbitrarily on Bard's campus, this is an example where students will not accept the law as legitimate. And I think you need to recognize that when students don't accept a law as legitimate, they will violate it at will and often.
Are people taking their candles into the woods or off campus, or hiding in deep, dark places that you can't see? Because that's a ban that it's kind of arbitrary, but it's for the public good of people. Because if you burn down your room, you're also burning down everybody else's room. And that's why we see smoking. And that's why you can ban it, because it's not just you making a choice. You're making a choice for other people, and you don't have the right to do that. And Bard says, while you're here, you don't have to come here. And while you're here, if you choose to come here, you can't make that decision.
Okay, first of all, we said we'll direct smoking inside, not in the wood. But the more important distinction here is that candles aren't addictive. So I don't see how that in any way is a good analogy.
You can make someone stop lighting candles by telling them to stop lighting candles, but you can't make someone stop smoking by just telling them to stop smoking. You need to offer actual options and alternatives, which you haven't.
Thank you. 3 minutes are over. And we now would like to introduce the first whip speaker, who's going to wrap up the case for his side. And we'd like to ask both whip speakers to please stay within the time limit, because we're running kind of a bit late. Thanks.
Draconian enforcement is a phrase we just heard. Draconian enforcement of a law which robs support from an industry that employs child slaves and is aimed at killing us all. Draconian enforcement of a rule that prevents people from becoming addicted to a deadly substance and dying as a result of it. We think that's an oxymoron. We don't think that you can have draconian enforcement of something which is such a clear and moral good, which is something else they said, arbitrary moralist view. People won't respect security for enforcing an arbitrary moralist view. Well, we're going to take a slight stand against moral relativism right here and say that many people consciously addicted to a deadly substance is morally wrong. We're going to say that.
Here, here.
Supporting an industry that supports child slave labor and the destruction of the environment and taking advantage of people in developing countries is morally bad. And so we're aiming at reducing all of those things, even if we have to be a little bit harsher about it than Bard generally likes to be. And we realize that our first time warning and our second time fine is a bit fascist of us, but we think it's justified in this case because of the great harms we're talking about, not just to the individuals now helping them stop smoking, not just to the individuals who won't be exposed to secondhand smoke, but also to generations of Bard students after us who will come to a school that has a culture less based on smoking, where they are less likely to start smoking, where they are less likely to regret starting smoking, where they are less likely to die as a result of starting smoking at Bard. We think all of those are uniquely good things that come from our model and from this resolution. Now, also, we heard a lot about how maybe this won't drive down the smoking rate as much as we say it will. And we freely admit that some people are going to go to the woods. Some people are going to stay in their dorms. Some people are going to try to get around this however they can. But unless they're willing to get up here and say that this ban and this draconian enforcement, they say both that the enforcement is draconian and yet it won't be effective, we think that's a contradiction. First of all, they have to be willing to get up here and say that if this ban and its enforcement stops even one person from becoming addicted to nicotine, even one or two or a small group of people from dying eventually as a result of becoming addicted, even if it stops just a few people in the future who come to Bard, stops them from becoming addicted, that it's still a bad thing. We think saving these lives, even these few lives, still makes this resolution, on balance, a good thing. And that's where a lot of the opposition's case comes from, accusing our model and our positions of not being as effective as we think they're going to be. And we say very, very plainly that no, it's not going to be perfect. And we don't come here to tell you that banning smoking is going to be easy, that students are going to comply with it overnight, that it's going to become effective right away. We're here to tell you that it's the right thing to do. And we think that's the right thing to do on balance, and we're willing to take that moral stance in this issue because the practice is so destructive and the industry is so evil. Now, I agree with the opposition that the most substantive points on their side are about the mission of Bard College. And we'd like to engage with this. The mission of Bard College to be a place to promote free thought and free thinking. And they say that an administration telling you what you can and cannot do runs counter to that. We agree with that to an extent. But we think what even further gets in the way of free thought is becoming chemically addicted to a substance, is having an industry pressure you into becoming chemically addicted to a substance. We believe that is a greater threat to free thought, a overall more destructive threat to free thought, and really a more likely one because nobody is really going to say, oh, I can't smoke here, the administration's making that choice for me. Free thought is worthless, I can't do anything, I'm just going to mindlessly go through the system. We don't think that Bard's culture, Bard's student body so heavily revolves around smoking that changing this one little thing is going to create some sort of dynamic culture shift that will destroy our atmosphere of free thought. Instead, we actually think it will make it better by making people less addicted to a substance. We believe so. We believe that even on the main opposition issue of what promotes free thought, we think an administration telling you you can't do something clearly bad is less harmful to free thought than having your brain altered by an addictive and chemical substance. We think that's the more draconian sounding of these things. So basically, we agree. We agree that this debate comes down to health, public health, versus free choice. And what we tell you today is that the health benefits are so clear and so large that it outweighs the personal choice. And that's for a couple of reasons. First of all, you don't have to come to Bard. We're not asking you not to smoke. We're asking you to make a choice, which is more important, smoking or coming to Bard. You can go to any other school if you value smoking so highly that you choose it over Bard. I'd be sad if you did that, but still. And second of all, that choice, in this case, is an illusion because it's brought about by chemical dependency and a very effective and very evil industry. And for all of these reasons, I urge you to take a stand with the government side and say that these products have absolutely no place on Bard campus.
Moral and political decisions and battles are difficult, time-consuming, and deeply personal. College is perhaps a place to resolve these, but it does not promise to resolve them for you. Leon Botstein does not resolve them for you. And in fact, Leon Botstein does not reign king over your body or your body politics. The fact is that we all make compromises. We all wake up in this country and we make choices about what we eat, what we wear, what we smoke, and all of these different choices. The fact is that these are the sort of things that we as adults must learn how to do on our own. And they're things that we need to learn how to do at college on our own. The fact is that even if you graduate Bard and suddenly there is no great moral standard overriding you, telling you how to smoke, you still have to make those decisions on your own, and we don't think it's a bad place to do it at college. The fact is that morals exist to all of us individually. We all make different moral choices, even if we all happen to be morally unified under whether or not smoking is inherently bad, which I'm not even sure we are. The fact is that side government has stood up here today and they said a lot about this is the right thing to do. That establishes one unified moral that Bard College takes and enforces upon all students. If we look at schools that have actually enforced bans on smoking on campus, they are schools, as my partner mentioned, like Texas Christian University. And there's a reason why Texas Christian University bans smoking. Because all students there believe in a Christian God, and all students there believe that their bodies are temples of God. We students at Bard are not as unified as this, and in fact I think in that sense we face a much more difficult road than those students, but at the same time a road which much more mirrors the world experience that we will all go out and face. These are the kind of difficult decisions we are going to have to make every day, the kind of difficult decisions which demand independent and creative thought, the very basis of the Bard College academic mission. The fact is that in their blind rage against the tobacco industry, side government today has failed to come up with a model with any efficacy. What they have come up with a model is one that enforces one moral standard for all students, a model which says students should not make their own moral decisions, but rather side with the moral decision made by the Bard administration. They've come up with a resolution that says Bard students should not so much have their political decisions made for them even, but rather have political decisions made with them as leverage. Rather, side government hasn't come up with a plan that will actually help addicts, and it hasn't come up with a plan that will produce students who can fight their own moral battles, students who can actually go about the independent thought to have to think, is this right or is this not? To have smoking banned on campus is one thing, but to have to actually look deep inside yourself and think, why do I do this? What am I supporting when I do this? Is an altogether different matter, and we think an altogether much more productive matter. The fact is that we think if we actually look at providing students alternatives to smoking, such as snus, we'll not only see harm reduction, but we'll also see students who have to consider why they do this in the first place. And we think that's far more important than banning smoking on campus outright, which we think, as we said before, will only drive it into the dark corners of Bard and will make things more dangerous, such as fire safety and secondhand smoke exposure. Okay, so you've heard all of this. All of you are going to leave this room and make an independent and free choice about all of the things that you've heard. All of you are going to have to go out and decide whether or not you think smoking is the right choice for you as an individual. Side government would not have it this way. For these reasons, and the reasons my partner has stated, this resolution will and must fall. Thank you.